Little and then Liner again, but it's picked up by England. Now he has a chance for England. Guscott, that's caught him. Now he has the pace of Tony Underwood on the outside. Damien Smith will struggle to catch him. Damien Smith, will he get him? Damien Smith has missed him, and Tony Underwood will score. A great try to England.
So here we are. Hello, and a really warm welcome to this brief introduction to the Facing Your Jonah programme within the Tony Talks series. Now, first things first, and just to totally confuse you, I'm not Tony Underwood. I'm actually the series editor, Paul Sowerby, and you're hearing from me first because unlike many former sports megastars and high-flying pilots, this one is actually pretty useless at blowing his own trumpet, which I've got to say has always seemed a bit crazy to me, given how amazing and, well, unique his achievements have been. And I really do mean unique. Thinking about it, first of all, only a thin slice of the population has played rugby 27 times for England, won a Grand Slam, and toured not once, but twice with the British Lions. And then only an equally thin slice has captained the world's biggest passenger aircraft, the mighty A380 double-decker. But you know, only one person has ever done both. And I don't know about you, Tony, but I think that's one hell of an intro.
I think so, mate. That's very good. Well, yeah, combination may be unique, but I don't think I could describe myself as being unique. But yeah, thank you. Very proud to hear those things listed. It is always just nice to remind myself or be reminded of it every now and then. But yeah, proud. It's a privilege to have had those experiences, and yeah, some amazing high points in my life. So thanks for reminding me. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. I suppose before we get cracking, just by way of a bit of context, we should probably just pause for a second to remember that you scaled breathtaking heights at the top of your chosen sport, rugby, only to come crashing down through injury. You then picked yourself up, dusted yourself down, and embarked on a second career, flying, and reached equally giddy heights at the top of that, only to then, I was going to say come crashing down, but only to then find yourself, on the receiving end of the so-called COVID redundancy call. I suppose before we go any further, I should be saying, how are you?
Well, frankly, Paul, yeah, I was devastated. Like a lot of people out there, I mean, well, better way, really. I just felt like I'd been hit by 380 again of one of my own. But yeah, didn't expect it came out of the blue like it has for so many people. But yeah, but thankfully, yeah, I think that's what we're here to talk about, the recoveries from the setbacks I've had in the past, and indeed this one. And the pivots I've gone through in my life, as you've mentioned there, the different career changes I've had, and to make those choices when facing these stark realities of a change being required. And it's provided learning points. And I think hopefully I've learned some of those lessons, put them into practice and turning things around now. So appreciate it. But thank you.
You talk about lessons, of course, there. And one of your, let's say, higher profile teachers was one 19-year-old Kiwi called Jonah Lomu. Now, that teacher stood 6'5" tall, I believe. I think I remember he tipped the scales at around 20 stone. And back in 95, of course, was running the 100 meters in a shade outside the Olympic qualifying time. Now, you lined up opposite him that day. Give us a feel for why you think he and that match, of course, is still talked about 25 years later.
Well, he obviously, because in the context, as you say, so young and also such a revelation in sport. You talk about people who transcend the sport. Probably Jonah in our sport, in rugby union, was very much one of those characters. Maybe the equivalent to your Tiger Woods, or in golf and Michael Jordan in basketball. But in context, as I say, it was a World Cup. It was a stage for anyone playing in that tournament. But it was very much his. For him to have gone through that tournament, pretty much dominated teams all the way along. Against an England team that day, we'd a very successful game the week before. We'd beaten Australia in the quarterfinal, who were the world champions. We'd won a Grand Slam, which basically means we'd won all the home nations against England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and France. Beaten all of those, so we were unbeaten. Very confident, myself personally as well. Got the try behind me the week before. So it's a massive challenge when you're facing anybody in a semi-final of a World Cup. It's a massive challenge when you're facing the All Blacks. But yeah, you talk about a massive challenge. They don't come much bigger in an individual form than Jonah himself, because as I said, and you said, a frame with the speed, and that combination was just really unheard of at that time.
Of course, not only was he a giant, but that afternoon he was a jolly angry giant. I mean, it was widely reported, that one of the reasons why he was as mad as a bag of badgers by the time the whistle went was due to you winking at him while he did his pre-match war dance. I mean, what was that all about? Did you have a death wish?
Look, come on, Paul, you know me, smiley, happy chappy that I am. I couldn't possibly wish that on myself. But yeah, he was. I think I've been told that he'd been fed lots of quotes during the week. Most of them, I think, taken out of context, but just really they felt that was a good technique. It worked on the games previously to get him fired up for the match, like he needed, and he firing up with the frame that he had. But yeah, he certainly came in the game angry with some quotes that I'd seemingly said that I was going to show him, etc. And as he said, he was going to show me. The wink, well, I don't know what was going on there, but the haka, for anyone who don't know it, it's a tribal war sort of dance, for want of a better word, that they do in Maori and Pacific Island culture, and it's just to lay down a challenge, and it's up to you to accept it. Well, we all do, don't we? It's a game of rugby. We're about to dance the dance on a rugby field, and I tried to nod at him, and I must have had something in my eye when the wink came out. But obviously, he didn't need any more firing up, but he certainly got it from what I inherently, possibly, maybe gave him a wink.
I think, seriously for a moment, it did occur to me, though, that we've been through the things that you've done in your life. And I suppose when the highs have been so high, presumably the lows are very, very low indeed.
Yeah, Paul, I mean, I gave it some context to say we were come off some very high highs in previous year, unbeaten quarterfinals, scored a try personally. But the game definitely didn't go our way. And we're talking about low. That was, probably the lowest I had in any form in my rugby career. I very much go in games with an aspect of the nervous tension is really there because you don't want to let anyone down, your teammates, etc. But one thing you got to realize with sport, I'm sure people do, is what it does, it magnifies the emotions, because we're basically doing what we're always doing from stretching from the first 15 pitch at school, except now it's at Newlands in a semi-final, and tens of thousands of people and millions are watching. And you haven't just got the hopes and dreams of yourself and your team that you're playing for, and you don't want to let down. But I was wearing a red rose on my shirt that day, which obviously means I'm representing my nation, my country. And when you are in an environment like that, and the highs are fantastically high when you represent them to the standard that you want to, but when you don't meet those standards and you do feel you've let them down, yeah, you do feel low. I mean, because you're bearing the weight of a nation literally on your shoulders, as well as myself. And so coming off that pitch was very difficult that day, and indeed since. But to a certain extent, you put things in perspective. It is a sport, etc. But yeah, at the day, very low. And I think I might have mentioned the story to you, Paul, but to add insult to injury, I came off the pitch in time-honored tradition, went to the opposition changing room to offer my shirt in exchange with the great man. But for whatever reason, I came out of that dressing room without one. He didn't feel it was didn't feel I'd obviously gained enough respect with him to warrant having one in return. So that was it
would have been baggy.
Well, you're absolutely right. Yes, wouldn't have much to do with it. But obviously, just to force that message, I'd let myself down, felt less the nation down to a certain extent, and didn't warrant a shirt from the opponent, who's just always puts salt amongst the wounds, definitely.
Well, look, we're here to talk briefly about the program as well. It's based on your 5 roads to resilience sort of personal belief system. Tell us about the 5 roads.
Sure. Well, it basically goes firstly with teamwork, and it's something we're obviously going to talk about a little bit further now, so I won't explore too much, but the gist of it is, first things first, let's start a conversation with your team. Number two, control the controllables. And the main element there is to basically say there are things you can and you can't to control right now. And so many people spend their time just so fixated in the things they just can't do anything about right now. They lose a lot of time and energy focused on those things, or wasted focus on those things, when they should be really just as fixated as possible on the things that you can control. And the things you can control, take a really positive narrative about it and just turn it into your favor as much as you can, so that you start going in the right direction. Once you start doing that, number three plays its part. It's prioritization of tasks. And it's really when you understand what you can and can't control, you just understanding, well, okay, that's all well and good, but what are the most important, the real nuts and bolts that you have to get right from the beginning, and you just have to focus all your efforts on as much as possible. Don't waste time on things that might be deemed urgent because people are blaring out for their attention on you on these things. Sometimes you just got to put that aside, say no to certain things, and just really focus on the important things first. Number four is called contingencies, and that's really another word for options. It's just working on, especially these times at the moment, we're facing such adversity, aren't we? But in these times of adversity, opportunities are there. And it's really just exploring with your team that you've started the conversation with, understanding what you can and can't do at the moment, just really focusing on just expanding your options as much as you can. And even if you don't have many options at hand, just really focus on, if it's one plan, just maybe focus on making it as good as you can be. Make it flexible, make it as efficient as you possibly can. Number five sort of wrap things up, really. It's attitude, and it's having a real basis of just positive mental attitude about each of these roads that we're talking about. And whether it's this road or another road you choose of your own, or you've explored elsewhere, just have a real focus on the fact that you've got a belief, you've got a roadmap ahead of you, you've got a system to follow. Just have a belief in those elements that are relevant for you, and just really put into practice, not just for yourself as an individual, but really instill that belief in your team as well.
Now, I know what's in the program, of course, and it's packed with great takeaways that will, well, I guess, apply to everyone. But just sum up for us what you want the program to achieve.
Well, I think, Paul, the priority for me is, obviously we're focusing on this one story, and it's involving a World Cup in a semi-final of a game of rugby. And obviously people are going to look at that and think, well, that's not really relevant and really relatable to the people tuning in. But I'm going to say it is. It's this. I mean, the stresses and the strains, it's the same we all face. It's just, as I've said, mine was in an office with a bigger audience and a few higher hopes on your shoulders, etc. But they are the same stresses and strains. And also what I found out in your life in a way, through looking back at my past experiences, and not just in sport and aviation, but also in life. And it's through looking back that I've seen just how I've taken these steps and how invaluable this roadmap has been for me. Everyone's going through this crisis right now and facing real challenges. And it's, for example, a real challenge for a lot of athletes out there face when they retire and they're questioning their identity and their place in the world, and really facing a real issue about a real pivot in what they're doing. This is my third career change as it happens. And what I want to do is pass on what I've learned, the things I've personally put into practice with this roadmap. I've been given, as I said, a privilege to have had the experience I've had in the past, but it's also, this privilege comes a platform of which I want to share others.
Okay, well, let's do what you said and very briefly select one of those roads, teamwork, for a bit more discussion. You touched there on something that you've said many times before, that the program absolutely isn't just about rugby, and it isn't just about flying. It's about, everyday challenges that confront everyday folk. But in a sense, I mean, that match that you spoke about, that World Cup semi-final back in '95, and that incredible young man, Jonah Lomu, and I promise we'll only mention him once more, that's it, done now. It did, on a serious note, help to define the person you are today. I mean, when you woke up on the morning of match day, you were being heralded as a superstar by the world media. And by the end of the day, you'd been, well, humiliated in front of 10 million stunned viewers and listeners. I just wonder how you used your 5 roads belief system, and in particular teamwork, to recover and bounce back.
Yeah, well, just to paraphrase again, the first step is to your team, and that's what I was able to do. Sort of straight back into the changing room, literally my rugby team, but whatever team that you have around you professionally, but also personally. And that's where the journey starts. The journey starts with conversations, some very difficult ones that you're going to face right now. And they help you explore. They start the process of diving into the problem facing you. And it's going to be loads of different conversations with really as diverse a makeup of a team as you possibly have. So for me that day, yes, it started with walking to that change room, started the conversation with my teammates. Some of them very short ones, not a lot of words sometimes, but sometimes it just starts from there, doesn't it?
So I think I'm taking from what you're saying then that it's not necessarily confined to the badge on your shirt or your surname or even the company logo on your business card. It's about different teams at different times to help tackle different problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the best way to think of it is your team should be made up of a variety of components, as you've just said. Can they have a different badge on them, their shirt, different name, etc. But they're all going to, in different ways at different times, and depending on the individual or people you're talking to, they're going to be there for different reasons. As I said, it's all about a conversation. So to begin with, it might be a talk to just vent your frustrations with. This definitely was in the changing room that day. But or have conversations to provide you with a sounding board, to provide as many different opinions, and the more you have, the better. But also, to me as well, the most fundamental conversation you need to have is at the emotional level. So casting my mind back to that day, walking into a changing room, well, I probably needed a hug most of all, but getting a rugby team and a 1990s rugby team where showing emotion was very much deemed as a weakness. Definitely some guys in that team I could share that sort of hug with, but obviously maybe not the team, but with someone with the same surname, or at least she did when I married her later that year, was Heidi, my fiance at the time, was able to turn to her on the emotional sort of need that you have for a hug and someone to, sort of have a shoulder to cry on as much as anything else. And it's at these times where you really find out what your team can offer you. I think so when you reach out to your team when you're in an hour of need at this time, and I very much was at the end of that game.
I suppose, thinking about that then, at home and at work, there are times in life when you feel you're at war and times in life when you feel you're at peace. I imagine, though, that you think it's when backs are against the wall that you know whether you've done enough to have a team behind you.
Yes, and we very much were in that changing room. But listen, you're absolutely right. It's easy when things are running smoothly, and just as it had been for that team, relatively smooth leading up to that. When you're winning, when things are going well, it's easy for things to come together and for people to be getting on with each other and smooth out any fluctuations about when there might be. But certainly when your back's against the wall, as you say, and you really are up against it, that's when you really find out. The way I like to put it is, have you got to where you are because of or in spite of your team culture? And indeed, whether your team, as you say, have your back when you're in your hour of need. That's when you really find out about it, because where there are gaps there, they'll find their way in if the culture isn't strong enough and your team just really isn't there.
Like any account then, really, I suppose. You need to make more deposits than withdrawals to avoid being overdrawn.
Yeah. Well, good way to think of it. And I'd like to think I didn't take too many withdrawals, or at least any sort of time I sort of had sort of experiences with the team. It was you share the successes as much as you share the failures. I think that's also an important nugget to think about. It's all about the team when you're having success as well as when you're having setbacks like this, and that comes really through months and years of nurture, with your team. And when you do, and as obviously you say, you're putting in as well as you're taking out. It's at these times, and if you have done that, you've really nurtured this spirit that you really, you can really maximize what you can get from your team. If you've got this surplus in your, if you like, trust account, and thankfully for me, it did turn out that I did have a reasonably healthy surplus in that trust account, both on a professional and personal level. And come the hour, they were there to support me.
You talk about having a surplus. Any thoughts on how to build it?
Yeah, I think teamwork really, I mentioned this thing when you talk about the team, it's all about having these conversations. And and teamwork can only come about through brilliant communication. And you're asking for it when you sort of starting this rebuild, but throughout the nurturing process, it's all about brilliant communication, and it's to do so to build trust, and you can only, as I say, build this by nurturing it over time consistently with your behavior, which is why it can take months and years to build. But as you know, and everyone knows, it can take a moment to destroy. So hence the consistency in honesty and integrity. And I mentioned this thing about the element of your team on the emotional side of things. And this is where I think, it's really important that you build it at this level, because you build it at a deeper level if you show psychological and emotional, intimacy and to a certain extent vulnerability with your team. And through that and building that trust in that language, if you like, really takes it to another level. It's understanding that it's not a weakness but strength to voice your feelings, to really lay yourself bare to your team. And you can't obviously do that with all of your team, but to the ones that you value the most, it's a conversation you need to have. But the ones who can help you here as you help them in times, but personally, but hopefully professionally, you have that in the makeup of your team and the network that you have.
Well, we've said teamwork's a massive topic, and I guess we're only just skating across the surface. In fact, I suppose it's just one part of one module in just one of your programs. Before we wrap up, what about one last thought about your Tony Talks series?
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, hopefully you've told that teamwork's a massively important thing that I feel passionately about, and we can talk about it for a while. But I think linking into the whole program, what I wanted to achieve is just really, as I say, make it relatable and relevant to people, and understand that I'm going through the same problems you're facing right now. But amongst all this, and while we're really facing this problem, and we're understanding that a real team helps develop kindred spirits, if you like, from at work and at home. It offers you more than you can imagine, but it's right now that this team probably needs you as well, because it takes a team takes giving as well as receiving. And everyone knows it really there's never been a more pressing need to feed off your team, but also to feed them right now as we're going through these turbulent times. And so especially at the moment, I think the one message I want to just relay to people is, well, how many of you have reached out to support others right now, just as you're reaching out them to get their support as well?
Well, we're just about out of time, Tony, so hopefully it gives everyone a flavour for at least what's in store. There's obviously a lot more at wordplaygroup.com, or you could just search Tony Underwood and you'll find your way to us. And of course, we'd love to see you there. So bye for now.